All right, guys, we're going to start the show shortly. A lot to cover on today's program. New York City is requiring proof of vaccination to eat inside. August 16th, this starts. New York City requiring proof of vaccination to eat inside. We'll talk about that today on the show. We'll start the program in a matter of moments. All right, guys, hit that like button, share the show. We're going to start in T-minus 20 seconds here. Microsoft requiring proof of vaccination to get back to work. Charlottesville City Schools, a mask ordinance if you want to be inside Charlottesville City Schools this fall. We'll talk with Alex Erpy, CEO of Emergent Financial Services. Skill games, you know those games that are in the convenience stores and the gas stations that people have been playing, kind of like the video crack? Well, those games got banned on July 1. And right now, the convenience store owners are rallying together to try to oppose this ban, even calling the ban as racially motivated, because they said many of the convenience stores that are owned by, minorities, people of color, people of Indian or Turkish background, people of Asian background. So there's an association of convenience store owners in the Commonwealth of Virginia. They are lobbying Richmond and our state delegates and local government to try to get these games of skill back in action and back legal. That conversation today on the I Love CVille show. Alex Erpy, our guest, Tuesdays with Alex. Alex is 8+ people, the CEO of Emergent Financial Services. And I'm going to cut straight to the chase here. If you have aspirations of growing your wealth, if you're unsure of how to plan for retirement, if you'd like to make more money for your golden years, your later years in life, if you have money to invest, Emergent Financial Services is who you should be calling. Trusted name in the game. Judah Wickower, our director, my friend, we can rock and roll when you're ready. Good Tuesday afternoon, guys. My name is Jerry Miller. Welcome to the I Love CVille show. Thank you kindly for joining us live in Charlottesville, across the Commonwealth, the country, and the world on the I Love CVille network. The show presented by Skooma Boutique Dispensary on the Charlottesville Downtown Mall next to Rapture. Skooma Boutique Dispensary, CBD, the Delta 8. Skooma Boutique Dispensary is where you need to go. We also thank Ting Fiber Internet for powering the network. Ting is truly crazy fast internet. Ting Fiber Internet. A lot we're going to cover on today's show. If you're sleeping under a rock, if you're not following the news, if you're not watching television, listening to this show, you may not know, and it's hard for me to believe that people don't know this, that this Delta variant is doing a number on the country right now. In fact, the CDC has said the 7-day average of daily coronavirus cases in the United States surpassed the peak that we saw last summer. So the 7-day average from the week we just had, that number surpassed the peak of a 7-day average we saw last summer when all of us were unvaccinated. Delta is more contagious than the chicken pox, and it's really gaining tailwinds and momentum It's impacting markets. It's impacting education. And it's time we now become a little more straightforward with what's happening. We're going to analyze and extrapolate some trends that we are seeing and pass them along to you on today's edition of the I Love CVille show. Let's talk locally first. Charlottesville City Schools followed Albemarle County's lead, and they mandated masks for all students this fall when entering a building of learning in the Charlottesville City school system. Albemarle County school system has also mandated masks. You go into a school building in Albemarle or Charlottesville City, you have to have a mask on, no exceptions. You see what's happening with a school bus driver shortage, which I covered yesterday, in Albemarle County and the city of Charlottesville. The city of Charlottesville needs 30 school bus drivers, 30. They have 9. City schools, county schools, transit authorities, and this is not just local, this is a macro or nationwide trend, are having a tremendous difficulty of finding bus drivers. And can you blame them? Who wants to get in a tin can and drive around unvaccinated children, 12 and under? Who wants to get in a tin can that's poorly ventilated and drive around folks that perhaps may not have other means of transportation to get around? As I said yesterday, there is a direct correlation between education and resources and having money and getting vaccinated. Education, resources, and money means you're likely been arm pricked and been vaxxed. Lack of education, lack of resources, lack of money likely means you have not been vaccinated. The folks, the demographic of customers, the demographic of students often riding school buses and public transportation is a demographic that often does not have resources, money, or an education. You can make an extrapolation or a direct connection or correlation to customers and students riding a bus, and you can extrapolate they likely have not been vaccinated. Hence, a school bus driver and public transportation shortage that is undeniable, nationwide and here in Albemarle in the city of Charlottesville as well. New York City and its mayor, Bill de Blasio, today have put a mandate into effect. If you go into a restaurant in the Big Apple, you have to show proof of vaccination. That goes into effect August 16th with full enforcement beginning September 13th. The mandate is known as the Key to NYC Pass. It's basically the passport, the vaccination passport that we've been talking on this network for so long. Bill de Blasio is mandating restaurants, gyms, and entertainment centers to confirm proof of vaccination before allowing customers in their doors. Now, we're folks that are more connected than ever because of social media. Let's talk in hypothetical terms. If New York City, the first city in the country to require proof of vaccinations across the jurisdiction to go to a gym, an entertainment venue, or a restaurant, eating inside, if New York City does this, and de Blasio did it today, what do you think is the logical turn of events that's going to happen? Other cities will follow suit. New York City is the world city. New York City and the Big Apple set trends. And those trends trickle down or influence other municipalities. Certainly ones that lead liberal or are progressive. Now, I'm not going to speculate or jump to conclusions. I will say Charlottesville's progressive and leans liberal. Charlottesville City Council, during quarantine and during Ralph Northam's mandates, Charlottesville City had stricter rules than the governor of Virginia imposed for the Commonwealth. I will repeat that. Last year, early this year, Ralph Northam, the governor of Virginia, had a number of rules and mandates. And the rules and mandates that Ralph imposed for the Commonwealth, they were superseded by the rules and mandates that Charlottesville City Council imposed themselves. The news today that we should consider, reflect upon, is the Big Apple mandating proof of vaccination for indoor dining, going to a gym, and entertainment venues. There will be an influence effect from this decision made by Bill de Blasio, the mayor of the Big Apple. The CDC said this morning, the 7-day average of daily COVID cases in the United States surpassed the peak seen last summer when the nation did not have an authorized vaccine. CDC Director Rochelle Walensky said it this morning to CNBC. U.S. COVID cases based on a 7-day moving average reached nearly 73,000 on Friday, according to data compiled by the CDC. That's higher than the peak average daily cases seen last summer, which was roughly 68,700. That means the 7-day average of this past week was 4,000 plus more cases than the peak of last summer. Digest that. I certainly am. Now, I'm going to ask this from a local standpoint. How will unvaccinated areas and neighborhoods be impacted by Delta and COVID? And what is the future, short term, of those unvaccinated neighborhoods? Here's a really good example for you. Louisa County, Virginia. I'm going to localize this for you. This is what we do in advertising. You localize, you humanize, and you personalize. I just gave you a macro trend, the 7-day moving average this past week. We're putting out more COVID cases than we did in the peak of the summer last year. I gave you another more macro trend in what de Blasio is doing in the Big Apple, mandating proof of vaccinations if you want to eat inside, work out at a gym inside, or listen to music inside at a concert venue. Now I'm going to localize it, humanize it, and personalize it from something that's really close to home. Louisa County is roughly, depending on how fast you drive and where you're located in Charlottesville, 35 minutes to 45 minutes away from this city. This studio is on Market Street in our building, the Macklin Building, in downtown Charlottesville. I can get to Louisa, the home of the Lions, in roughly 45 minutes in my car. Did you know that less than half of the residents in Louisa County, Virginia, are fully vaccinated. I will repeat that statistic. Did you know that less than half of the residents in Louisa County, Virginia, are fully vaccinated? In comparison, the city of Charlottesville, roughly 60% of residents are vaccinated. Albemarle County, 62% of residents, 62% of residents in Albemarle County are fully vaccinated. You have a tale of two municipalities. Albemarle, one of the most vaccinated and safest municipalities in the Commonwealth. It's the reason why the New York Times told its entire readership to vacation in Charlottesville City and in Albemarle County, because folks are getting arm pricked here. Albemarle County, 62% fully vaccinated. Louisa County, less than half fully vaccinated. With the benefit of hindsight, and this will not happen until we get more data science. That term comes up so much on this program, data science. We got a $125 million school backed by Joffrey Woodruff's money, the hedge fund titan, opening in the very near future at the University of Virginia, a data science school. Until we get a larger sample size, until we have more time to study the data, we won't truly know the answer to the question that I'm about to pose to you. And here's the question. How will unvaccinated neighborhoods, how will unvaccinated counties, cities, and jurisdictions be impacted long-term by COVID when compared to municipalities that are closely situated that have been fully vaccinated? You call the raising of taxes, which pushes out individuals on fixed income, gentrification. Real estate taxes go up in Belmont because it's a hot place to live, because it's close to the downtown mall in Charlottesville. Because it's popular, you get bidding wars. And a home that 20 years ago that may have traded for $275 is now trading for $575. And as more homes in Belmont trade for $575s, the real estate taxes go up and up and up and up in Belmont. And that increase in taxes, which are paid in June and December of every month, eventually pushes out an older population, the OG, the old guard, that's living on a fixed income because they can't afford the additional tax exposure. That's one example of gentrification. I'm curious to this question. Can COVID be its own form of gentrification? If you have a pocket of people, otherwise known as a neighborhood, and this neighborhood is not vaccinated, maybe it's because they don't trust medicine. Maybe it's because they're working so hard they don't have an opportunity to go and get vaccinated. Maybe it's because it's of lack of education, financial resources, and economic means. It's no secret that unvaccinated individuals, the population of unvaxxed is uneducated. The population of unvaxxed is likely not super wealthy or does not have money at its disposal. These pockets, AKA these neighborhoods, How is COVID going to change them in the short and long term? Can COVID be an actual version of gentrification itself, changing the character and the potential and the future of a neighborhood? Who is willing to go to a municipality or a neighborhood when it has a reputation of being unvaccinated? If you're an individual or a family of economic means and education, are you less likely to patronize a municipality or a jurisdiction that has a low vaccination rate? I'll cut straight to the chase. Louisa County, less than half of its population is vaccinated. If you're in Albemarle and you're fully vaccinated, and your family is, will you get in your vehicle, in your minivan, and drive to Louisa to explore wineries, vineyards, restaurants, retail, and other experiences when you know and you hear that Louisa has got less than half the population vaccinated? Probably not. So the longer a neighborhood or a jurisdiction goes with the reputation of not being vaccinated, the more that neighborhood or that jurisdiction's brand, its image, is negatively impacted. And in the era of ubiquitous smartphones and in the era where perception is reality and people read a book by its cover because they see it on social media before actually understanding the pages and reading them in the book, the jump to the conclusion map will say that people will not patronize, will not visit, will not support unvaccinated pockets of people, otherwise known as neighborhoods, or unvaccinated municipalities or jurisdictions, otherwise known as cities, counties, and towns. New York City, the first to mandate the vaccination passport that we have been predicting would be a reality. Now, my friends, watch as other left-leaning cities follow suit of the Big Apple. And my friends, watch what happens when all the folks in this country who are taking their last vacation before school starts and are going out of state, out of region, to another portion of the country, spending time on vacation in areas they've never visited or don't truly know from a vaccination standpoint, and then return home, start school, watches 12-year-olds and under who have not been vaccinated, watch as they go inside to learn in less than 3 weeks, and watch as the summer turns to fall and flu season. You got traveling all over the country now for vacation, and then people coming back, bringing with them, we don't know. You got students about to go to school, 12 and under has not been vaccinated. And you got flu season on the near horizon. That's the collision of three things that undoubtedly will impact towns, cities, states and countries, markets and businesses. So I close my first point with this message. Beating this damn pandemic is undoubtedly tied to a vaccination. And Americans and people in this world getting vaxxed. My mind and perspective and my tune has changed over the 17 or 18 months we've been dealing with this pandemic. The libertarian in me has said Darwinism, survival of the fittest, getting injected is up to the individual. Freedom. Now, after 18 months of dealing with this and having a little guy at home that hasn't been vaccinated, from my perspective, courage in the pursuit of freedom is embracing a vaccination that can leave our town, our city, our county, our commonwealth, our country, and our world in a better place. And if we can get herd immunity, and most of us, if not all of us, vaxxed, then we go back to the freedom and the liberty and the rights we all want. It's about getting vaccinated. Microsoft, the publicly traded company, one of the top 15 positions in my portfolio, is requiring all employees to be vaccinated before they go back to work. Facebook and Google said they are going to require worker vaccinations as well. Microsoft said it today. If you want to go back to work, and Microsoft is starting in person in September, the only way you can get into the office, into HQ of Microsoft, is to show proof of vaccination. Facebook and Google are doing the same. I'm going to ask you this question. If you're unwilling to get vaccinated and you work at Microsoft, and you say, you know what? I don't want to get vaxxed. I'll work from home. And that's your right. But your peers and your colleagues, your equals on the totem pole of professional hierarchy, if your equals and your colleagues choose to get vaccinated, choose to go to Microsoft and work inside, at an office, at a desk, at their headquarters, choose to get FaceTime and conversation time with their direct bosses, with their boss's boss, with their boss's boss, what do you think is going to happen to you when you're working at home in your BVDs, in your Fruit of the Looms, in your robe, in your PJs, at your home office desk? You will be left behind. You will be left behind. You will be left behind. Human nature. The boss promotes the person he or she sees the most, not the individual contributing to the project in their underwear at their home office. You will be left behind if you choose the route of working from home. It's human nature. We're going to get to Alex Erpy in T-minus 60 seconds. City schools, you wear a mask if you want to be inside. Albemarle County schools, you wear a mask if you're going to learn inside. Neither city schools nor Albemarle County schools have enough bus drivers right now to get students to and from the classroom when school starts in less than 3 weeks. Parents and their families are vacationing left and right the last hurrah before school starts. What happens when these families come back to Charlottesville and Albemarle County after vacationing all over the U.S.? What do they bring with them? What happens when you put thousands of students 12 years old and under in poorly ventilated buildings of learning schools? What happens when flu season and the winter and the fall come before us? All three trends, all three circumstances, we will soon find out the answer. Less than 3 weeks finding out the answer for two of them. Microsoft requiring employees to be fully vaxxed if they want to come back to office in September, and Bill de Blasio, the mayor of the Big Apple, has mandated proof of vaccination if you want to eat inside, work out at a gym inside, listen to music at an entertainment venue inside. What's the next progressive, left-leaning city to follow the Big Apple's lead? Because it's coming, and they're coming. I'm going to ask these questions to Alex Erpy. Judah, I'm Skyping him now. Judah Wickhauer is our director. We thank Scott Wagner of Scott Wagner Chiropractic and Sports Medicine for being a part of the show. Scott Wagner and his integrated medicine practice guys are changing people's lives. Who's got your back? Dr. Wagner's got your back. Alex Erpy is on the hotline right now, the hotline presented by Ting Fiber Internet. Alex, you are live here in Charlottesville, across the Commonwealth, the country, and the world. We can start anywhere you want. I will follow your lead. What's on the medulla oblongata, my friend? Do we got you, Alex? We're going to Skype you back. I think we got a frozen Alex here. He did look very good in that frozen picture right there. Well manicured. The beard is in good shape. Mrs. Erpy and Mr. Erpy, Xavier, I love that shirt that you recently gifted Alex. It looks good. It looks very good. I'm reaching out to him again here, J-Dubs. All right, we got you, my friend.
There we go. Froze up for a second.
My friend, where do you want to go? I'm going to follow your lead.
No, it is a very interesting scenario what's happening up in New York City. And the reason I say that is because we're rapidly reaching a point where what troubles me is just from a business owner perspective up there, because what we're seeing in New York City is the city saying we have a goal that we want to achieve, which is basically we don't want people who are not vaccinated to eat indoors, to go to the gym indoors, to be indoors basically, right? But New York City is either basically saying we don't have the manpower to enforce this or don't wish to enforce this ourselves. So we are going to turn small business owners into our agents of the state, essentially. And I think that's a big onus to put on small business owners. And I think particularly just thinking as a Latino small business owner, I think a particular emphasis on minority small business owners, because we tend to have very small businesses, so you're giving them a lot of requirements that they now have to think about. You're basically saying they have to enforce with people who come into their store proof of vaccination. And some people are going to have their little apps, I'm sure. Some people are going to show you a card. Do you as a small business owner have any idea whether that card is an actual vaccination proof or it's just some card that somebody printed at home? And are you going to be held liable if it's not? And I think it's a very difficult situation that they're putting particularly small business owners in. And unfortunately, because of the fact that vaccination rates are very different, minorities are much less vaccinated right now than white Americans. I'm wondering if we were going to see a little bit of a racial gap here where a lot of minorities are going to be unable to participate in certain aspects of life because they have not yet taken the vaccine, whereas the larger quantity of white Americans that have taken it, because they've been more comfortable historically doing so, are going to be able to go in and do whatever they want. So it's an interesting scenario that I think we're seeing here, both from a perspective of who's taking it and who hasn't, and from small business owners and the challenges that they're going to face in New York City right now, and we'll see where else that goes.
That is a fabulous take. Can you turn that into a sizzle reel, what he just said, so we can play on tomorrow's show, please? The answer of what he just said right there. I tied COVID and lack of vaccinations almost to a 2021 version of gentrification. You alluded.
I mean,
go ahead.
Historically, there's just been much more hesitancy, right, and we know the historical reasons why. But it's just interesting to see the point where we're basically saying, not only will you suffer health-wise, right? We all know the health reason to take the vaccine, right? But society is now saying you will not be allowed to participate in any semblance of normalcy if you do not. And we're inevitably going to see a racial gap. And it's interesting because I know society's been focusing a lot on racial gaps for the past year and saying those cannot be allowed to persist, but we're creating a brand new one, I think.
Well said, Alex Erpy, CEO of Merchant Financial Services. Mrs. Erpy, that was a phenomenal take by your oldest son, numero uno right there. I'm going to throw this to you. What is your, take it a step further. I think everything you just said is actually going to happen. So he's basically saying vaccination rates, there's a direct correlation between not only vaccination rates and wealth, education, and skin color. He's exactly right. So let's say, what's the next step? You were basically saying minorities probably, if the vaccination rates don't uptick, probably are not going to be patronizing or enjoying inside entertainment, dining, exercise, quality of life at the same frequency or clip of white people.
Essentially, that's what we're going to see, I think, for a while, unless something radically changes. And I think this is very much a stick approach, right? This is saying the carrot didn't work. Of, if you get vaccinated, we'll give you free beer. If you get vaccinated, you'll have health benefits. If you get vaccinated, you have this. So they're trying to stick approach. They're basically saying if you are not vaccinated, we will penalize you in these ways to prevent you from living what was a normal life for, more than 24 months ago, right? And what we're going to see is unless that changes people's minds, which so far the carrot has not, right? There's still a gap between vaccination rates among white Americans and among basically every other racial category that you have, non-white Americans. And if that persists, which we haven't seen an indication that any kind of incentives, carrot approach has made that change. If that persists, what you're going to see then is a participation gap. And that's assuming enforcement. My suspicion is you may also see some minority business owners or smaller business owners that are sitting there in New York City saying, how on earth can I possibly enforce this, and basically essentially not enforcing it and being willing to take the risks of not doing so. So you may see enclaves of minorities patronizing other minorities, Latinos patronizing other Latino businesses, knowing here I can behave normally, but I can't go to this white establishment because they are going to ask me to show some kind of proof that I don't have.
Good gosh, that is such a good take. I 1,000% agree with everything he just said. So I'll throw this to you. The scenario you painted, which I think is accurate. Minorities supporting other minority businesses because the proof of vaccination requirements is not going to be as stringent as, say, a non-minority owned business. That's going to further the spread of this COVID amongst the minority community.
I think so. I mean, I'm beginning to reach the point where I'm suspecting this is going to spread no matter where. I mean, the CDC basically admitted when they did the mask requirements returned last week, they basically admitted that Delta can be spread amongst vaccinated people the same way as among unvaccinated. They were saying it had the same viral load. Obviously, your effects, don't get me wrong, like the hospitalization, the deaths. So in other words, you're protecting yourself from worse effects by being vaccinated. But the CDC was basically admitting last week that Delta is going to spread where Delta is going to spread. So I'm not sure we're going to see more spread. The question will be, do we see a higher hospitalization rate, which we've seen for basically the entirety of the pandemic. So I'm not seeing a change there. What I'm seeing is basically a continuation, health-wise, of what we've been seeing. The change will be in where people choose to patronize and how people are participating in society. Because I think the impact of COVID is going to be exactly the same as what it was, because we're basically being told by the CDC that Delta is spreading. You have the same viral load as a vaccinated person, but you're just having fewer symptoms.
Do you think de Blasio was right with the proof with the vaccination passport to eat inside, work out inside, or listen to music inside? And the second part of the question is, this decision de Blasio is doing is once again prioritizing or giving the market advantage to a big box corporation with a deeper staff and more money on its balance sheet so that they could potentially hire a bouncer at the door to check cards. The mom and pops don't have the balance sheet, the capital resources to do that. Furthermore, the mom and pops, they are mom and pops because they can't afford a lot of, they have smaller places of business. The mom and pops don't have the square feet of a big box because that's their mom and pops. They don't have the money to afford the square footage from a rental standpoint of the big box. Doesn't this indirectly do exactly what happened in 2020 when government, Ralph Northam, for example, prioritized the Target, the Lowe's, the Walmarts, and the Costco's over the Foods of All Nations, over the Anderson Seafood and Catering? You see where I'm getting at?
Oh, no, exactly. And I think you're exactly right. I mean, what bothers me about this decision, even more so given the data we have now, is at least last year there was so much health uncertainty about the data. There was not much going on. And I still think it was a mistake to prioritize those corporations as we did. But now it seems just even more inexcusable because I'm not seeing how this is going to have much of an impact in the way things, in terms of spread. And it just seems to me that you're just further putting a lot of pressure on, like you said, the mom and pop shops to try to keep up with these big corporations. And the last thing they need is now large swaths of people saying, I don't even want to go out. Even if you're vaccinated, you might be sitting there saying, I got to wear a mask anyway. I got to social distance anyway. Now we got to get this proof and be showing this card around. I just won't go out to eat, period. And before you know it, now the mom and pops are in a very bad position all over again because now your McDonald's is going to do fine, your Chipotle's are going to do great, and your mom and pop indoor dining restaurants are going to do poorly. And it seems very much a shame to go down this route. And in some ways, it seems almost they're trying to cover for what I think has been poor messaging on the vaccines. I mean, the Johnson & Johnson, you can see U.S. vaccination rates, the trajectory just plummets after they pull that, because you're just sending the mixed messaging of, is this safe? Is this not safe? Now the CDC is sending mixed messaging. Does it work? Does it not work? I mean, when I first saw that news last week, I had to consider this. I'm a financial advisor. I'm used to research, digging into things, finding out what are the data behind headlines. And even I had to sit there last week and say, for a moment, when I saw the headlines, I'm like, do the vaccines not work? Right? I mean, what are they saying? Why are they making us do this all over again? And then I had to dig in there until I got to the point where the data says, no, you can spread it, but your rates of hospitalization are lower. But I'm just thinking, as someone who, if I were someone who was not used to this kind of research, and I just relied on, what I saw at the headline of my local paper or the headline of my local news, my first reaction might have been, wait a second, the CDC says vaccinated people need to mask. Does that mean I'm not safe anymore? And so I think that's part of the issue here. And this is sort of a Band-Aid on New York's part to say, we haven't gotten as many people vaccinated as we want. Let's see if this stick works. And I think the stick is just going to end up hitting small business owners, particularly, like you said, the mom and pops.
Alex Erpy, our guest, CEO of Emergent Financial Services. Guys, Emergent Financial Services, your choice for retirement and wealth building, Emergent Financial Services. Throw this to you here, and then we'll get to a couple comments that have come in that I want to relay to you as well. How is this going to impact this thriving economy that we've enjoyed so far in 2021? Are you lukewarm now, or is the economy vulnerable back end of Q3 and Q4?
Oh, I am somewhat lukewarm, but I think it's all going to depend, on decision making in this case. I mean, if we again go into some kind of lockdown mode, then inevitably we are going to see the economy contract. That's what happens when government tells people don't go out, don't go to work, your business must close. What we're seeing now seems to me headwinds against the economy, right? So we are just, there's no way to read the New York news, and if it particularly happens elsewhere in the CDC news, as anything other than a headwind in terms of the consumer wanting to go out, right? And we've seen that in the past, that when you put all these, the more difficulties you put for people to go out, the more they'll think twice about going out. It's inevitable. So it's a headwind. I don't think it's a devastating one, what we've seen so far. I think it's more that typical headwind of uncertainty, anxiety, what's this variant doing, what works, what doesn't work. If we go full lockdown, I think that it's inevitable again that you're going to see really bad economic contagion. Perhaps I'm thinking worse than last year, because last year there was a lot of support that had to go out, and a lot of small business owners either didn't get the support or they just made it through this thing by the skin of their teeth. And if we hit them again, I'm not sure they get up again.
The fabulous Xavier Yerpe is leaving comments. I've been so impressed with how Xavier Yerpe has become proficient in social media and digital and technology. It's so impressive, Xavier. I truly mean this. What is all of this chaos about vaccine due to the economy? We're covering that now. What worries me really about this, Alex, is New York City is leading this charge. I get why de Blasio is trying to lead this charge. New York City this time last year was the most devastated of pretty much any city in the country. People were sprinting from the Big Apple, and apartment vacancy rates were through the roof, to the point where we on this show were talking about, is the future, and not just us, everybody was talking about, is the future of the Big Apple in jeopardy?
Exactly.
So, the Big Apple, in a lot of ways, and you know New York City, your father lived in New York City, okay? New York City, in a lot of ways, sets the trend for other cities out there. What's your take on NYC being the vax passport leader and first to market with checking proof of vaccinations to come inside?
That's a very interesting question, because typically, I think what you will see, my suspicion is you will see a lot of larger cities will probably follow this lead. The question is whether smaller cities, I'm thinking places like Charlottesville, even have the infrastructure to attempt something like this. And the will or the ability to enforce something like this. I'm not
well, and I don't
know the laws of New York to know that.
I don't mean to interrupt you here. Last year, Albemarle County had the vaccination police that was going around small businesses and auditing them to make sure customers were staying 6 feet apart. So Albemarle County did try at the end of last year a vax police rollout plan to try to enforce mandates. But go ahead, please. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I grant that there certainly was the will in terms of mask. I think you're thinking more masked police.
Yeah, mass police. Yeah.
This is, I think, a little bit more of a challenge, because if you're not going to go honor system, you need. I mean, New York has these things on apps. I don't even know how he's going to enforce it in New York. To be honest with you, I mean, our business is going to have to scan people's apps. If someone comes in with a card, does the business say, no, you need to download the New York Excelsior pass? You need to then input this information into the pass, and then you can come into the restaurant. So I think the smaller the city, even if they have the will, they may not have the infrastructure to do this. What they may do, of course, is just go back to requiring everybody to wear masks all the time indoors, because then you just enforce that by walking into the restaurant and taking a look at what's going on. But it would be difficult for me to imagine how you actually do that, do you send health inspectors and say, I need a record of everyone that came into this restaurant, and then I'm going to double check whether they were actually vaccinated? Would it be legal for restaurants to collect that kind of information? So I think there's a lot that would have to be done on a local level for certain people to follow New York. I think the larger cities can do it. I question whether the smaller ones will.
The closer, Xavier Yerpe, Xavier the closer Yerpe has got a comment here. The Atlanta, Georgia Fed GDP now has been falling from 14% to 6%. Can we guess why, gentlemen?
Oh, I think he's exactly right. So Atlanta Fed, so that's an interesting tool right there that I would definitely recommend to people to take a look at every once in a while. So that is a Atlanta Fed GDP Now. is a projection. In other words, it collects data to try to project what GDP is going to look like. Because typically we don't get GDP numbers until the actual ones, until a month or so after the quarter has ended. So they're saying is that the Atlanta Fed has seen its projection for the next quarter's GDP drop from 14 to 6. And basically it's saying there's enough headwinds here in terms of economic data. So remember, so the Atlanta Fed GDP number isn't looking at Delta, what de Blasio's doing, policies that are being debated, CDC guidelines. It's not looking at any of that. It's looking at consumer data, producer data. In other words, how economically are people reacting to this news, Delta, CDC guidelines, and so forth. So what that's telling me is that people are reacting by curtailing. Maybe businesses are reacting by curtailing their spending. So I think we're obviously, the Atlanta Fed at least is seeing, and that's an imperfect number, I will grant. It doesn't always match what eventually comes out. But at least that projection system is seeing that people are already economically responding to the uncertainty of just what's going on in terms of Delta and the CDC decisions and now what we're seeing in New York. So that's a concerning number, and I think is what I pointed to in terms of headwinds, right? 6% is still a good growth rate, right? It's still growth, it's not a contraction, but so the drop from 14 to 6 indicates some serious economic headwinds that we need to be thinking about.
Especially with the contraction that we need to recover from last year. Johnny Ornalis owns 2 restaurants. He said Vax ID, vaccination passports, will be just like getting a fake ID for alcohol. We don't, as business owners, have the technology to know whether they're real or fake or not. That's to your point.
Oh, I think he's exactly right. I mean, we've had that problem in Charlottesville for a while. Right?
I mean, I was going to Coupe de Villes as an 18-year-old.
Exactly. I mean, we all know what happens on the corner and how many of those kids out there actually have the age 21 on their IDs.
Right.
So imagine now something that says, because I'm pretty sure it is different institutions issue these vaccination little cards when you get vaccinated. It's not like it's a one-size-fits-all being issued by the DMV with some kind of proof. I mean, I think he's exactly right. So it's a big onus on them to try to enforce this.
James Watson says this, Alex and Jerry, let's not forget to mention that the vaccination card is a piece of paper. They didn't really roll out an app or anything that can be scanned from your phone. So how does somebody who's working construction all day, who wants to grab lunch at a nearby deli, going to pull out a piece of paper vaccination card? What happens when you lose your vaccination card? It's not very durable either. What happens if it gets wet or dirty or falls apart? It's almost like carrying around your birth certificate in your wallet.
Yeah, I was thinking that's a great point by James. I was actually thinking even the little paper Social Security card.
Yeah.
That they give you, like, you never carry those around because you can't risk losing that.
Right.
It's a piece of paper, and it's going to be very difficult. And even in places like New York, so New York City has a certain app, like it's a certain pass app that's on your phone. But even if you have that kind of infrastructure, are you basically saying we're going to refuse anyone who walks in with the paper version? Are you going to say, like, oh, this paper one that you're showing me isn't good enough. I need you to go back outside, download the app, somehow get approved, verified in 5 minutes, and come back into my restaurant? What restaurant owner is going to turn someone away like that? Because if the other problem is, just from a customer relations standpoint, you turn away a legitimately vaccinated customer because you suspected he wasn't vaccinated, you've lost a customer probably for life. Because he is going to be
pissed,
mad.
Yeah.
I mean, he's going to be pissed.
Yeah.
If I go into a restaurant and here's my vaccination card, and they're like, you don't have it on a phone, and I don't know, that one looks a little sketchy to me. I'm sorry. I'm not coming back. That was legit. And so I think I think James is spot on there with that point.
Alex Erpy dropping knowledge bombs, guys, here on the I Love CVille show. He's the CEO of Emergent Financial Services. Ray Cadell, He's a broker in real estate in the area. He also is a fantastic horn player and manages a ton of bands through his music business. Big Ray and the Cool Cats and my real estate agents are all fully vaccinated. I even replaced some musicians who refused to get the shot. This is serious stuff, folks. This question is coming in from a regular listener, Grayson. Jerry and Alex, is the vaccination card the next black market business that's going to boom?
Ooh, that's certainly a possibility. It's tough to know. I mean, that depends, I think, on, with any black market, it depends on the stick. In other words, the more expensive it is in terms of not just dollar-wise, right, but in terms of time, ability to do things, and so forth, the more expensive it is to not be vaccinated, the more you would have then people shell out into a black market for a fake ID, right? If you think about the fake ID world of, kids with under 21 fake IDs, the reason that's the case is there's nothing you can do about it. If you're 18, you can't become 21, no matter how much you try. Whereas if you are unvaccinated, it might be cheaper for you to become vaccinated than to pay your way.
Yeah, it's free. It's free.
So I mean. No, even in terms of like cheap in terms of whatever people are doing as their cost benefit risk analysis, right? At some point they might sit there and say this is too costly to not do this even with a black market. So I'm not sure we'll reach that point. I think it depends on how many more sticks they try to put on top of where we currently are.
All right. Alex Erpy, CEO of Emergent Financial Services. I want to hear what's happening on Today Mañana at 10:15 a.m. A couple more questions coming in. This one, a follow-up from Grayson. How do you invest knowing what we know now? It seems like it's a completely different market now than it was even 3 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I think you're exactly right. And for me, that's a great question from Grayson there, because it gets to the heart of, I think, the investing philosophy, which is you want to be in the market all the time, right? And you adjust your percentages based on what you're seeing in terms of, I think this sector might do better. I think I want to be a little more defensive. But here's what I'll say to that, right? And we get this question a lot as financial advisors, is now not the right time to start, or should I sell everything? And our point is always, you don't want to miss out on the best market days. If you miss out, I think over like a 20-year period, if you miss like the 10 best days of the market, your annualized return, so your annual return, drops from about 13 to 10%. So you wipe out about 3% every year worth just by missing 10 days, the 10 best days of the markets. And sometimes those days, you might expect those days to be in the middle of big bull markets. A lot of times those 10 best days are in the middle of bear markets.
That's right.
Like the market will decline 5, 6, and then all of a sudden there's going to be a day where it's up 10. Right? And so you don't want to be missing out. So our philosophy tends to be that when you're investing, you got to think of what's my actual time horizon. Right? And if your time horizon is long, you just want to stay in the market. Maybe you want to adjust. Maybe your financial advisor, I know we frequently adjust, right? Sometimes we'll say, we'll have a little more cash on hand now, so if things go south, we can buy low. All right, we may want to make small adjustments, but you'd never want to totally pull out of the market because it's a long-term gain. Obviously, if you're 65 or 70 and you're retired and you're still invested heavily in stocks, you need to rethink that from a general portfolio standpoint, right? But that's a problem at any time. That's a problem that you need to think about, whether it's headwinds from Delta variant or the market's booming, right? But if your time horizon is 10 plus years, then the key is be in the market, stay calm, don't panic, right? There's going to be headwinds, right? Things may go south, right? We may have a bad second half of the year market-wise. But you want to be in the market so that you're there and positioned that when it rebounds, you're there. The last thing you want to do is be the person who sells in 2009 and then misses out on a decade's worth of huge growth, right? So you bear with it And like I always say, you adjust on the margins. You never pull out completely. So that would be our advice in terms of just an investment philosophy in a really uncertain environment.
Last question for you. Can we do one more?
Absolutely.
Okay. Kevin Smith. Jerry, ask Alex if COVID. What is he saying here? Ask Alex if COVID and these lockdowns and this Delta variant are great things for Bitcoin and pushing it forward. We saw Bitcoin last year reach all-time highs. I know it's under 38 now, but I would think COVID and getting away from a printed dollar and tangible money is the best thing for Bitcoin long term.
That's a good question. I'm going to answer that by saying first thing you got to do, Kevin, though, is you have to split the idea of digital currency from Bitcoin. So remember, Bitcoin is a type of digital currency, but it is entirely possible for society to move away from a tangible dollar, tangible coins you exchange, and not do it with Bitcoin. And in fact, I think there's a very large incentive for the United States government, other world governments, to make their own digital currencies and not have those be Bitcoin.
Why is that?
Because they want currencies that they can easily control in terms of supply of the currency. Bitcoin, because of the way it's constructed, because of the way the Bitcoin mining works, it's not easy to control the supply of Bitcoin at any moment in time. Because basically the government would have to like create huge data farms, start churning them out, then suddenly stop doing it. I don't even know how you would contract the supply of Bitcoins. I'm not even aware how that would work because they're out there floating. So I think in terms of the government's like control, their Federal Reserves like to be able to increase the money supply quickly, decrease the money supply quickly. You can't do that with a Bitcoin that is run out of a blockchain. You do that with a digital currency that you control where the zeros and the ones go. So my suspicion is I think those are two different questions. To answer the question specifically on Bitcoin, I think that depends on numerous factors. So that the tailwind of Bitcoin, right, is, let's face it, you can use it to buy things, even things that you don't want people to know you're buying.
Yeah, if you want to break the law, you're using Bitcoin.
If you want to break the law, use it. Or if you want to, even people that are worried, like, I don't want to be tracked. I don't want people to know. I don't want Amazon to know what I've been buying. I don't want Google to know what I've been buying. It has that kind of aura to it. That headwinds, I would say, against Bitcoin are basically the fact that the governments of the world are saying we don't want people, more and more are suggesting we don't want people using this, and we're going to make it more difficult to use. So that, I think, are the two factors that play into Bitcoin, and it's tough to say right now which is more powerful, but I don't think the move away from tangible currency itself is enough of a reason to buy Bitcoin, because there are numerous other possibilities that we might see in the future for non-tangible currency that aren't Bitcoin, the actual cryptocurrency.
Well said. Well said. Nicholas, your brother's watching. He said, Kevin.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, if the Erpies are watching right now here, we love the Erpies on this show here. Nicholas says, Kevin could be referring to the government scare and being wary of government power, therefore having lots of wealthy people moving away from currencies tied to governments that are struggling with COVID. What about Bitcoin as a reserve of value?
Oh, that's also entirely possible. I mean, my suspicion is at some point a lot of cryptocurrencies may end up being black market ways for people to put their wealth away in ways that is not easily traceable. But I think as for the average investor, that's a more difficult thing to get involved in them, because the only reason, as we've talked about before, right, the reason to buy Bitcoin is right now speculative / gambling. In other words, you buy it because you think that other people will buy it and it will go up. You don't buy it because it has an actual intrinsic value. It doesn't sell anything. It doesn't make anything. There is no actual coin. You buy it because you think other people will make the price go up. So the question is, if it becomes one of those shady currencies that the wealthy people use to move their wealth away from traceable eyes, aka government eyes, is it easy to buy and sell as the average person? And the answer is probably no. In which case you want to, long term, you don't want to be in that kind of currency. You never want to be in something that only certain very wealthy people can actually transact in.
Well said. Alex Erpy, CEO of Emergent Financial Services. You see what he is about, guys. You see the intelligence, the honesty, family-owned business, guys, approachable and knowledgeable. Emergent Financial Services. Pick up the phone, reach out to them through the website. They're going to help you guys grow your wealth. They really, really will. Can you give us some perspective on what to expect on Thursday at 10:15 a.m. with Today y Mañana?
Absolutely. Today, Mañana is going to be a lot of fun on Thursday. We're going to split a little bit. We've got some tech and some local Hispanic business. So tech, first we're going to be joined by Nikki Hastings. So she is the executive director of Seville Bio.
Nice.
So they're a group that they put together a lot of they network between a lot of the biotech companies that are here in Charlottesville. So we'll talk a little bit about innovation, what's going on, what she's seen in terms of biotech here in Charlottesville, maybe even how that'll impact Charlottesville in the future. And then secondly, we'll be joined by Esteban Ruiz Castillo and Alejandro Gonzalez. They're a father-son duo that are the owners of Ruiz Landscaping. So a local Latino business. We'll see how they're doing, where people can find them, how people can support them, how they've been navigating, and maybe what it's like to do a little father-son duo in business. I know I can speak to that a little bit, but we'll see if they have the same positive experience.
I love it. I love it.
Which I'm sure they do.
Sure they do as well. My friend, you were on point today. We will see you Thursday. Spoke to Keith today. He said the Friday show was one of his favorites. It was just absolutely amazing. Xavier, I sent a text message to Numero Uno here on over the weekend. I thought the Friday show was exceptional with the Erpies, with myself, with Keith on Real Talk. We will see.
It was a blast. People should check it out if you haven't watched it yet.
It was a blast.
People should go to YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, find it, and because it was a blast.
They can go to. Do we archive it on Today y Mañana?
Yeah, we're gonna archive it on Today. I think I'm waiting on the version that fits.
Okay, got it.
For Instagram TV because, as you know,
It's only an hour. We went way longer.
We went a little more than an hour.
We went long.
But I know definitely on YouTube, and I'm sure on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, people can listen to it.
Fantastic. Thank you today. Thank you. You were awesome.
Oh, thank you. Great question.
You have a good day.
It was you too.
Right, thank you. Alex Erpy, guys, CEO, Emergent Financial Services. Mrs. Erpy, I love that new shirt. You got your guy right there. You got your boy right there. That shirt, dynamite. Absolutely dynamite, Mrs. Erpy. It's 1:40. And I have a standing conference call with the client every Tuesday at 1:45. And I need to do a little prep for it. So I didn't get to this topic today. The topic that I did not get today is skill games. You know, the video machines or the video gambling machines that you see in convenience stores or gas stations. Those were banned on July 1. Banned on July 1. Those video games, those skill games, video crack is another description of them. They generated more than $100 million in revenue for the Commonwealth during COVID. The delegates in Richmond, the governor's office, they allowed skill games during COVID because they needed the revenue to climb out of the COVID financial hole. $100 million generated in 1 year from those video games, those skill games, the video crack in convenience stores. Yesterday, a group of over 100 convenience stores, a group of owners of over 100 convenience stores in the Commonwealth, they gathered together with Virginia Senator Joe Morrissey. He's a Democrat. And they're petitioning or lobbying or challenging, however you want to put it, Richmond and the governor to allow skill games in convenience stores and gas stations again. They have gone so far to say disallowing video game, those skill games or the video crack in convenience stores and gas stations. They've gone as far to say is it's racist policy. And they're basing it on the amount of mom and pops that own convenience stores and the gas stations in the Commonwealth. And they're saying these mom and pops, gas stations and convenience stores are predominantly owned by people of color, by minorities, by folks of Indian, Turkish, Asian, minority descent. And they said these skill games yesterday, with Senator Morrissey leading the charge, are keeping us not only in business, but our businesses profitable. And by disallowing these skill games, you've essentially created, and it's literally, I'm reading it verbatim from the story online, quote, end quote, an Alibaba bill. And the Alibaba bill targets minority business owners. That topic tomorrow on the I Love CVille show. My name is Jerry Miller. Thank you for joining us today on a Tuesday. Take care.